My name is Anna. I am 34 years old. I want to tell you about my life. It is not easy to share. I do not feel proud, but it is my truth. I married 2 times. I hoped for love. I wanted peace. I tried hard to build a home, but love did not stay with me. My heart is still heavy. I met my first husband when I was 25. His name was Daniel. He was cheerful and clever. He asked me many things about myself. He made me laugh. We met in a simple way. I was waiting for the bus. He was waiting too. He said, "It looks like a long wait today." I smiled and said, "Yes, it does." Then we talked. The next day he called me. I said yes to meet him again. We walked in the park. We talked about music and food. He liked green tea. I liked coffee. We laughed about it. He held my hand. I thought he was a good man. After 8 months, we married. The first days were bright. He brought me fruit from the market. We went on short walks. We watched films together. We cooked dinner in the evenings. I laughed a lot in those days. I thought, yes, this is love. This is life. But after some time, things began to change. He stayed quiet. He went out more often. He came home late. He looked tired. When I asked, "Is everything okay?" he only said, "I'm fine." But I felt something was wrong. He did not listen when I talked. He did not ask me about my day. He looked at his phone too much. We ate dinner in silence. I tried to make him happy. I cooked his favorite food. I asked, "Do you want to go out this weekend?" He said, "I'm busy." One evening, I asked, "Daniel, do you still love me?" He looked at me and said, "Don't ask silly things." Then he left the room. I sat there alone. The food on the table was cold. My heart felt cold too. I wanted to cry, but no tears came. For many months, I waited. I hoped maybe things would get better, but they did not. We lived in the same house, but we were not close. I felt like a stranger. I was not a wife, not someone he cared for. I felt lost. One day I said, "I cannot live like this. I feel alone." He said nothing. He turned his eyes away. I said, "I want a divorce." He said, "Do what you want." That was all. After 3 years of marriage, it ended like that. No fight, no goodbye, only silence. I moved to a small flat. It was tiny, but it was mine. The first night, I sat on the floor. I looked around. The room was quiet. I felt sad, but also safe. For the first time in years, I could breathe. For 1 year, I lived alone. I went for walks. I listened to music. I read books. I tried to understand myself. I told myself, next time I will choose better. I will not hurry. I will wait for the right man. Then I met another man. His name was Mark. He had a warm smile. He spoke gently. He helped old people cross the road. He gave his seat on the bus. I thought, he's different. He's kind. We met at a friend's small dinner. We sat side by side. He asked about my job. I asked about his family. We talked for hours. He made me laugh. He looked into my eyes. I felt something calm. The next day, he called me. He asked, "Can I see you again?" I said yes. We went to a small cafe. We sat by the window. He told me about his love for old movies. I listened. I smiled. I thought maybe this time it will be okay. After 1 year, we got married. It was a small wedding with close friends. I wore a soft pink dress. He wore a gray jacket. We held hands and said, "I do." I felt happy. I thought, this is a new start. But soon I saw it again, the silence, the distance, the cold. He worked late. He came home tired. He ate quickly and went to sleep. I asked, "How was your day?" He said, "Just work." I waited for more words, but none came. I started eating alone. He said he was too tired. He stopped asking how I was. When I said I feel lonely, he said, "You think too much." That line again, the same words my first husband said. "You think too much." I could not believe it. I had married again. I had tried again. But I was in the same place. A house with no joy, a table with no talk, a bed with no warmth. I felt tired, not only in my body, but deep in my soul. One evening, I cooked dinner and waited. He came in and said, "I already ate outside." He looked at his phone. I asked, "Do you want to sit with me?" He said, "I need to sleep early." I sat there looking at the food. I felt empty. I remembered my first home after the divorce. It was small, but it felt peaceful. Now I had a bigger home, but I felt lost again. 2 men, 2 houses, 2 times I gave my heart, 2 times it broke. I began to change. I stopped cooking for two. I stopped waiting. I stopped hoping. I went for walks alone. I sat in the park. I watched children laugh. I saw old couples holding hands. I wanted that, but I did not have it. Sometimes I asked myself, is something wrong with me? But no, I knew I gave my best. I loved with all I had. But love is not only about trying, it is also about who you choose. Now, I was married, but I felt alone. I lived in a house, but it was not a home. I spoke, but no one listened. I smiled only in front of others. I did not know what came next. I only knew I was tired. I wanted love. I wanted peace. I thought marriage would give me both, but it did not. I married twice, and I was still in pain. Before I share more of my story, I want to ask, where are you listening from? Knowing someone hears me gives me strength. I woke up one morning. The sun was bright, but my heart was heavy. Mark was still asleep. He always slept late on weekends. I looked at him. He looked calm, but I did not feel close to him. We had been married for 2 years. I tried to be a good wife. I made breakfast. I cleaned. I smiled when he came home. But I did not feel seen. I did not feel loved. One day I asked, "Do you love me?" Mark looked at me and said, "You always ask that." I said, "Because I don't feel it." He stood up and said, "I work hard. That is love." Then he left the room. I sat alone at the table. I drank tea slowly. I wanted to believe him, but I could not. Love is not just work. Love is not only coming home, love is care, love is listening, love is time. That week, he came home late every night. He said work was busy. I asked, can we eat dinner together one night? He said, maybe next week. But that week never came. On Sunday, I went to see my old friend. Her name was Clara. We sat in her kitchen. She made tea. She looked at me and said, "You look sad." I said, "I feel empty." She held my hand. She said, "Tell me what is wrong." I told her everything. I told her about Daniel. I told her about Mark. I told her how I felt lonely in both homes. She listened. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You give too much, Anna, but they do not give back." Her words stayed in my head. All night I thought about them. You give too much. It was true. I gave my time. I gave my care. I gave my love. But what did I get back? Silence, cold words, an empty table, a quiet bed. I started walking each morning. I needed air. I needed to think. The park near my home was calm. I liked sitting on the bench and watching the trees. I watched people with dogs. I watched children play. I liked the sound of laughter. It reminded me I was still human. One day I saw an old couple. They walked slowly, side by side. The man held the woman's hand. She smiled at him. He looked at her with love. A tear fell down my cheek. I wanted that. Simple love. Real love. That evening, Mark came home early. I was surprised. I said, "You are home before dinner." He said, "Yes, I'm tired." I asked, "Can we talk?" He said, "Not now. My head hurts." Then he went to the bedroom. I turned off the stove. I sat on the floor. I felt small. I felt like nothing. My voice had no place in that house. A few days later, I tried again. I said, "Mark, we don't talk. We don't laugh. We live like two people in one house, not one life." He looked at me and said, "What do you want from me?" I said, "I want to feel loved." He said, "Love is not always loud." Then he left the room again. After that, I stopped asking. I stopped waiting. I stopped hoping. I made food only for myself. I watched films alone. I walked in the park alone. I started reading again. I wrote small notes on my phone. I wanted to find my voice again. One day, Clara came to visit. She looked around and said, "It feels quiet here." I said, "Yes, it is always quiet." She asked, "Do you want to stay in this life?" I looked at her and said, "I don't know." I was tired of breaking. I was tired of hoping. I was tired of starting again. But I did not want to stay where love did not live. Mark did not notice the change. Or maybe he did not care. He ate. He went to work. He came home and stared at his phone. I stopped speaking. I had no words left. One morning, I looked in the mirror. My face looked older. My eyes looked sad. I whispered, "You are still young. You still have time. Don't waste it in silence." That day, I packed a small bag. I left the house. I went to Clara's place. I stayed for a few days. Mark did not call. He did not ask where I was. On the fourth day, he sent a message. Are you coming back? Not, how are you? Not, I miss you. Just, are you coming back? I did not reply. Clara said, you don't have to go back if it hurts you. I nodded. I knew she was right, but it was hard. I had married again. I had tried again, and now I was leaving again. It felt like failure, but deep inside, I knew it was not failure. It was truth. It was me choosing peace. Peace is not failure. Peace is love for myself. I sat on Clara's sofa. I looked out the window. I saw the trees move in the wind. I took a deep breath. I closed my eyes. I said, you will be okay. Mark never called again. Not once. That told me everything. He was never really with me, just like Daniel. 2 men, 2 chances. 2 times I gave my heart, but no one held it with care. Now I was still with Clara. I was thinking about my next steps. I did not want to rush. I did not want to marry again. I wanted time. Time to heal. Time to grow. Time to find myself. Maybe one day I would love again, but for now, I wanted to be free. I stayed with Clara some more weeks. Her home was small, but it was warm. We talked each night. We ate simple food. We watched old shows and laughed. I had not laughed like that in a long time. She never asked me to go back. She said, take your time. I was thankful. She was the only one who truly saw me. One morning, I woke up and looked out the window. It was raining. The sky was gray, but I felt calm. I sat with my tea and thought about my life. I thought about both my marriages. I asked myself, why did I stay so long? I stayed because I was afraid. I did not want to be alone. I stayed because I hoped things would change. I stayed because I thought love must hurt. But now I knew real love should not feel like that. After some days, I told Clara, I want to find my own place. She smiled and said, I will help you. We searched for 2 weeks. Then we found a small flat. It had 1 bedroom, a kitchen, and a little balcony. It was simple, but I liked it. I moved in with just a few things. I placed my cup near the window. I put a soft blanket on the chair. I made the bed with white sheets. That night, I sat on the balcony. I looked at the stars. I felt peace. No one shouted. No one walked away. No one said I was too much. It was quiet, but it was not cold quiet. It was safe quiet. I made new plans. I walked in the morning. I bought fresh fruit at the market. I sat in the park and watched trees move. I read again. I smiled more. Sometimes the pain came back. It touched my heart. One day, I met an older woman in the park. She was sitting on the bench beside mine. We looked at the flowers. She smiled and said, they grow slow, but they always bloom. I smiled back and said, yes, they just need care. She nodded and said, just like people. We sat in silence. Then she asked, "Do you live near?" I said, "Yes, just 2 streets away." She said, "I come often. I lost my husband last year." I said, "I lost too, but in a different way." She touched my hand. "You are still young. You will grow strong again." Her words were soft, but they stayed with me. I whispered them to myself before sleep. Some days later, Mark sent me a message. He wrote, "Are you okay?" I looked at the screen. I did not feel sad. I did not feel angry. I felt nothing. I did not reply. I did not want to open that door again. That night, I thought about how far I had come. I had cried. I had begged for love. I had waited in silence. Now I was alone, but not broken. I was still healing, but I was no longer lost. One afternoon, I saw a woman in the store. She looked at me and said, "Anna?" I said, "Yes." She said, "It's me, Julia. We went to school together." I smiled. I remembered her. We talked for a few minutes. She said, "I live nearby now. We should meet again." I said, "Yes." The next week, we met at a cafe. We talked about school, life, and love. She said, "I divorced last year." I said, "Me too, twice." We laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was honest. She said, "It's not easy." I said, "No, it's not." But we smiled. We understood. After that, we met each week. We walked in the park. We talked for hours. She said I thought I was the only one. I said, "Me too." But we were not alone. Many women tried, gave, hoped. We just never spoke about it before. Now we did. Talking helped. Being heard helped. One evening, I sat on my balcony again. I looked at the street. I saw a little boy ride his bike. His father ran behind him and clapped. I smiled. I did not feel sad. I felt peace. I did not know what would come next, but I was okay. I was not waiting for a man. I was not waiting for love. I was learning to love myself. That was enough. My eyes looked soft. My face looked strong. I whispered, "You are still healing, but you are not weak. You are not broken." I married twice. I gave my heart twice. I lost myself twice. But now I am coming back to me, slowly, gently, fully. And this time I will not lose myself again. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and share. More gentle and hopeful stories are coming soon.